developers made a big deal out of them signing that. And us, they're going to support businesses.
Yeah.
It just, maybe it's just kind of a pride thing. I'm like,
Oh, I'm with you. Ready? Welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled City Council meeting for the City of Evans, April 2nd, 2019. I'm Brian Rudy, the Mayor. Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Rudy?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Clark?
Here.
Councilmember
here?
Johnson?
Present.
Councilmember Spear?
Here.
Councilmember Castle?
Here.
Councilmember Neal?
Present. Thank you. We will start the meeting with some proclamations. 4 of them. So the first proclamation will be for National Service Recognition Day. Proclaiming April 2nd, 2019 as National Service Recognition Day in the City of Evans, Colorado. Whereas service to others is a hallmark of the American character and central to how we meet our challenges. Whereas a nation's elected leaders are increasingly turning to national service and volunteerism as a cost-effective strategy to meet their needs. And whereas AmeriCorps and Senior Corps participants address the most pressing challenges facing our communities, including educate students for 21st century jobs, fight the opioid epidemic, respond to natural disasters, and support veterans and military families. And whereas national service expands economic opportunity by creating more sustainable, resilient communities and providing education, career skills, and leadership abilities for those who serve. And whereas AmeriCorps and Senior Corps participants serve in more than 50,000 locations across the country, bolstering the civic, neighborhood, and faith-based organizations that are so vital for economic and social well-being. And whereas national service participants increase the impact of the organizations they serve, both through their direct service and by managing millions of additional volunteers. Whereas the national service represents a unique public-private partnership that invests in community solutions and leverages non-federal resources to strengthen community impact and increases the return on taxpayer dollars. And whereas the national service participants demonstrate commitment, dedication, and patriotism by making an intensive commitment to service, a commitment that remains with them in their future endeavors. And whereas the Corporation for the National and Community Service shares a priority with local leaders nationwide to engage citizens, improve lives, strengthen communities, and is joining with the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties, Cities of Service, and local leaders across the country for National Service Recognition Day on April 2nd, 2019. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Brian Rudy, the Mayor of Evans, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2019 as National Service Recognition Day and encourage residents to recognize the positive impact of the national service in our community, to thank those who serve, and to find ways to give back to their community. I believe is Hannah here to collect this proclamation? All right, we are giving this proclamation to Hannah Hostak with Weld County. We'll leave this for her, I guess. Thank you. Next proclamation is in honor of Arbor Day. Proclaiming April 19th, 2019 as Arbor Day in the city of Evans, Colorado. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. Whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Whereas trees reduce the erosion of the precipitous topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. Whereas trees are now a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. Whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas the city of Evans will be recognized for the 35th year as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting practices. Now, therefore, I, Brian Rudy, Mayor of the City of Evans, do hereby proclaim April 19th, 2019 as Arbor Day in the City of Evans and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. I think I'm Scott Sandridge here from the city. Present that to Scott. Scott, thank you for everything. Thank you. Okay. National Crime Victims' Right Week. Recognizing the week of April 7th through 13th, 2019, National Crimes Victim Rights Week in the City of Evans, Colorado. Whereas Americans are the victims of 20 million crimes each year, affecting individuals and communities. And whereas years of investment in crime victims' rights and services have developed a system of victim response that can help victims recover from crime. And whereas reaching and serving all victims of crime is essential to supporting thriving communities, because those who receive holistic services and support are more likely to remain invested in their communities. Whereas dedicated victim service providers are working every day to meet the needs of crime victims, yet there are still too many victims without meaningful access to rights and services. And whereas many victims face barriers such as isolation, distrust of authorities, language limitations, lack of transportation, or cultural barriers that keep them from accessing the services of the criminal justice system that can help them recover from crime. And whereas we must make a dedicated effort to expand the circle of those prepared to respond to victims and link them to the resources that can help them recover. Whereas engaging a broader array of healthcare providers, community leaders, faith organizations, educators, and businesses can provide new links between victims and services that improve their safety, healing, and access to justice. Whereas National Crime Victims Week Rights provides an opportunity to recommit, ensuring that all victims of crime, especially those who are challenging to reach or serve, are afforded their rights and receive a trauma-informed response. Whereas the City of Evans is hereby dedicated to strengthening victims and survivors in the aftermath of crime, building resilience in our communities and our victim responders, we are working for justice for all victims and survivors. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Brian Rudy, Mayor of Evans, do hereby proclaim April 7th through the 13th, 2019 as National Crimes Victims' Rights Week. I believe we'll be giving that. Is Commander still here? We'll be giving that to the police department. Next one is 2019 Holocaust Memorial Observances Proclamation. Whereas a sound knowledge of history is a foundation for participation in self-government, and our democracy does best with thorough, informed voters. Whereas the annual Holocaust Memorial Observance of Northern Colorado provide an opportunity for all who live here to learn about the decisions, actions, and consequences of the Nazi government that intended to destroy whole groups of people it deemed inferior based on their blood, being a danger to the superior German race. And whereas the Nazi campaign slogans from the 1920s through their government propaganda that ended with the Allied victory in 1945 might be rendered in more modern language of 2019. For example, in today's language, a Nazi spokesman might have said, Our enemies need to be eliminated because their biologically inferior threatens the genetic superiority of those of us who are truly German people. And whereas we study this history to be able to learn its details involving genocide, millions of planned deaths of people because of who they were and not for any wrong they did. As importantly, we seek from the Holocaust the meanings that we can help us protect our own future. And whereas there are groups espousing hatred of others in America today who echo false ideas of racial supremacy and urge our government to act to make their manifestos into rules to protect true white Americans. And whereas a well-educated community is necessary to promote the ability to respond effectively to hateful speech and to prevent actions based upon hate. And whereas the Holocaust Memorial observances are recognized and supported by the cities of Greeley, Eaton, and Evans, and also by the University of Northern Colorado, Ames Community College, the High Plains Library District, high schools in Greeley and Eaton, as well as the Greeley Interfaith Association, Beth Israel Congregation, and the Unitarian Universal Church, and many other local organizations and individuals. Whereas we sponsor these observances in the hope that all who will attend will be better prepared to speak out when they hear others from inciting hateful actions. Now, therefore, I, Brian Rudy, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Evans, Colorado, do hereby proclaim April 7th to April 14th, 2019 as Holocaust Memorial Observances and encourage the residents of Evans to participate in these free activities. And is Dave Mecklenburger, Dave? Dave, I'd like to present you with this proclamation. If you have a moment, if you have anything you'd like to say. All right, Dave, I appreciate it.
On behalf of the Holocaust Memorial Observation Committee, I'd like to greatly thank you for this proclamation and appreciate your support. We have a number of activities that we would also like to invite you to, everyone to attend. I was looking for brochures in the lobby because I thought someone would drop them off, but I didn't see any, but I will drop them off tomorrow. But we have a fantastic array of events. We started this coming Sunday with an interfaith service at Beth Israel. We have book readings, we have movies, classes, and of course the highlight will be our Holocaust survivor speaker, who will be happy to share her saga. And it's not a story, it is a saga. She was born in 1929. Her family was, of course, persecuted when the Nazis came into power. They were able to flee to France just before the start of the war. And of course, the Nazis invaded France. They had to flee to the south and then trek across the Pyrenees into Spain and then into Portugal before they received permission to immigrate into the United States. And of course, she lost a good number of friends and family in the Holocaust. It'll be a fascinating presentation, and that'll be at 7:30 next Wednesday night at the UNC Ballroom. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address City Council? Please step up to the podium, state your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Stephen Grant, 2405 Dock Drive in Evans. And I had presented to you some information with regard to the issues around the about to be signed red flag bill that has come before the Colorado State House. And it has put, unfortunately, you as a city and us as citizens in between legislation and the state constitution and the federal constitution with regard to the Second Amendment and our rights, namely the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And so from you, I would like a status update on where the city stands with this, number one. Number two, I would like to encourage the city to not just adopt a resolution, but to adopt a city ordinance on this, connecting the city to both the Constitution of the United States of America and also to the Colorado State Constitution on the fact that our rights must not be infringed. Unfortunately, with this legislative cycle, we find ourselves fighting several different battles on several different fronts. And so it may weary us at times that we have to. I applaud your resolve in passing the resolution speaking out against 181, and believe that we need to continue to stand there. But also our unalienable right of the ability to keep and bear arms, I believe, is very critical because it defends all of our other rights and all of our other liberties. Rights cannot be taken away. They can merely be violated because rights are not given by government. They are given by Almighty God, and therefore cannot be taken away. And so I believe that this is an overreach, and I would encourage you to pass an ordinance supporting the Second Amendment, and I'd like to know of your progress as things come forward.
Okay, thank you. I can give you a little bit of an update. We have asked staff to look into that. I know our attorney and our police chief are working on some stuff. We would hope to have something tonight. I told Jim when I talked to our city manager, they weren't ready yet, and that's okay.
Sure.
So we're still working on it. We are in progress. I'm not saying which way we're going to go one way or the other, but we are working on it.
Good deal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address City Council on any issue? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 6, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item 7, consent agenda. Item A, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 19th, 2019.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item 8, new business. Item A, consideration of resolution number 08-2019, a resolution approving a preliminary plan with conditions for property referred to generally as the Peakview development, and we will hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. Tonight we do have the next step in the consideration of the Peakview subdivision plan. This is the preliminary plan phase of the approvals. Just want to start with a reference point for people. This project is planned for the southwest corner of the intersection of 37th Street and 65th Avenue. And with that, I will turn it over to Public Works and Community Development Director Randy Reedy for some more on our process, and he will introduce other staff, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Just a couple process comments, and I'll turn it over to Ann Bess Johnson for the presentation, and then I know the applicant has a presentation for you as well this evening. As you know, this was a matter that was continued from the last meeting to this one so that we could correct the language throughout. This is a preliminary plan approval. We had interspersed the word plat, but our code is very clear. Land use code uses the term preliminary plan. So that's what this is. This is a resolution. It's number 08-2019, requesting approval of this preliminary plan. The Planning Commission did meet on this item at its last meeting and has forwarded a recommendation of approval with conditions as you see them in this resolution. So staff will make a presentation. We're happy to respond to questions along the way.
Good evening, Mayor Rudy and members of the City Council. Ann Bess Johnson with the City of Evans. It's not cooperating, so I'll say ding, and we can move forward. All right, so a traditional land use process in the City of Evans per our code is usually a 4-step process. And it begins with zoning, which is oftentimes concurrent with annexation, progresses then to sketch plan, preliminary plan, and the final plan, all being done before anybody can get their construction and building permits. So on the next slide, we'll see what Peakview has gone through for their process. Their first step really was the Metro District. Then they came to you. This is not anything that is required in the city code at all. It was just the first step that they took. The next step then was zoning. And again, the change of zone was heard before Planning Commission on January 22nd and the City Council on February 5th and 19th. And then the next step, we combined the sketch plan and preliminary plan because they were so far along in their development that we deemed that that was appropriate. And it's oftentimes on the sketch plan, if you're far enough along in the engineering design phase, you can combine that with preliminary. That was heard by Planning Commission on February 26th and then is before you tonight. And then the next step that they will have is their final plat. And the final plat is going to be in filings or different phases. And the first phase will be towards the southeast part of the project. And that will just come to you. It does not go to Planning Commission. And so in the next slide, as Jim was mentioning, the property and the project is located south of 37th Street, east and adjacent to 77th, and west and adjacent to 65th Avenue. The project is approximately 225 acres. And then on the next slide, the applicant is here along with their representative, and they'll be discussing a little bit more about what this project is about. But the maximum build out is 1,097 residential units, and that can be combined into a maximum of 446 single family, 290 apartments, and 361 townhomes. There is 19.32 acres of commercial space. It's located in that northwestern corner. It's highlighted, the potential building footprint is outlined in red. You can see that on the map here. Site amenities will include a community center and 50 acres of parks and open space. And then on the next slide, this details all of the public notification and review that was provided for this particular application. So for the preliminary plan, it was published in the Greeley Tribune starting on the 15th of February, and it was a joint publication announcing both Planning Commission and the City Council meetings. Surrounding property owners were notified quite a few times, once on January 22nd, on February 2nd, and February 15th. And we had an internal design review team meeting on February 12th, and the property was posted with a sign on February 14th. So we really did go above and beyond in our notification. Now, I'm not going to read this slide for you. It's mainly posted up here for the audience to be able to see what the intent of a preliminary plan is. It's really intended to review the technical requirements of a platting process. And then the final plat then takes into consideration what was discussed during the preliminary plan stage and takes it to that final plat. We review design standards. We take a look at the required improvements that are required as part of the city code or any other master plans that may be in effect. And then we also ensure that the development can be compatible with existing and future development of the neighboring area. And then on the next slide, this discusses the review criteria found in the city code in section 1806-080D. Planning staff and then subsequently Planning Commission found that the application, due to the application materials provided and the review provided, it was consistent with the comprehensive plan. It complies with the Land Development Code and the engineering design regulations and standards, that public notice requirements were met, that there is a public water system service without unreasonable burden on the existing water supply, and the same goes for the sanitary sewer service. And then on the next slide, these additional criteria have to be met. The application must show that it's not going to have any detrimental effects on soil erosion, will not increase air pollution, does not contribute to traffic congestion or unsafe vehicular traffic circulation, does not cause unreasonable burden on the school district, does not place an unreasonable burden on the ability of the city to provide services, does not have an adverse impact on the scenic or natural beauty of the area, any historic resources that might be in the area or on that particular property, and then also does not have an undue adverse impact on wildlife and their habitat. And the applicant did supply quite a bit of application materials. They had an environmental consultant. They've provided a traffic impact study. They're working with the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the wetlands on site. So they are going above and beyond to illustrate how these components of the city code are being met. And then on the final slide, again, this just kind of recaps, and it does conclude the staff presentation. Planning Commission did find that the proposal met the intent of the development standards found in the municipal code, as well as the comprehensive plan, and is recommending approval. Be forwarded on to you all with conditions of approval that are found in the staff packet. And I'm able to address any questions that you may have regarding the review process, but I know the applicant is also here and has a nice presentation to share with you as well.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to approach and give us your presentation, please?
I was hitting the arrow buttons.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Evans City Council. My name is Ken Puncarelli with LAI Design Group. My address is 88 Inverness Circle East, Suite J101, Englewood, Colorado. Thank you for having us here this evening. We've, as you recall, we've been before council before on the matter of zoning. And this evening, as Ann had mentioned, we're here for seeking preliminary plat approval. The name of the project has evolved from Hill Pond to Peak View, and it will be recorded on the plat ultimately as Peak View, and the Metro District is set up as Peak View, but just to let council know, the marketing name that we've come up with is Solstice, and so hence you see some different names on some of our slides and material. That's the reason. So many of these developments evolve over time when you first submit them, I'm sure, as you've experienced. So Ann had really kind of covered the intent of the preliminary plan. We've kind of talked about our location and rationale. One of the things that I don't think we had an opportunity at our last meeting to discuss, because there was some concern with proximity of neighbors and neighboring properties, and so we've, since that meeting before council as well as planning commission, have reached out to our neighbors to discuss their concerns and so forth. But this slide really nicely illustrates distances of where we are from, properties to the north and east, Mr. Weiss's property and his homestead and major farm operations to the south, a little over 300 feet. Our neighbors, the Carlsons, about 1,600 feet to their homestead as well. So that's the purpose of that slide. As you may recall, this slide really it's our topography, and it shows kind of a ridge line here. So the reason that we show that is because when you see on our master plan and subsequent preliminary plan, there's a reason that our detention ponds and water quality ponds are kind of where they are, because this ridge line that goes here, drainage goes in this direction as well as in this direction, and this is your existing wetland area. These are the wells that are on site and off site, and as we mentioned during our February meeting, these are underway to be plugged and abandoned. So Marc-Andre and his legal team have been working with the oil and gas companies, and their intention is to plug and abandon. Photograph of the site, aerial. So as you recall, the zoning that got approved, commercial on the corner, and then the rest of the yellow area here is a variety of residential uses from townhomes to alley-loaded single-family homes to traditional front-load garage single-family homes. And then the areas in green are our trail and open space areas. The area in orange here will be our community center where our clubhouse will go. So there'll be a community center with a pool located there. And then within these various green space areas, there'll be either trails, playgrounds, or some amenity of some sort. And in this particular one, just south of the club area, that'll be an irrigation pond, but there still will be a trail around it, and benches and trash receptacles and those kind of amenities in locations where it would be inappropriate to have a playground. And then this is the development summary of how we got to the 1,097 total units. And then the master plan, and then you'll see on the next series of slides how closely this matches the subsequent preliminary plan. So one of the things that was mentioned earlier this evening was the phasing. So you'll see in orange here, that will be our phase 1A. So effectively we'll have about 3 or 4 different housing product types with different builders in our phase 1A. And then as part of that, we will extend roadway to the north here. We'll include our irrigation pond, but we'll also have a secondary emergency vehicle access out to Freedom Parkway. And then on the heels of that, phase 1B in yellow will effectively finish out the roadway here for the street in its ultimate condition. And then later phases are in blue. Filing 2 will ultimately be phase 2, and then phase 3, the multifamily in the southwestern corner, and then ultimately when rooftops are in tow here, grocery stores certainly need those in order to justify an investment. So that's kind of the highlight of the phasing. So this is just a little bit of the history. We've already kind of gone through some of that. One of the, I think, major comments that came out of, and I think Commissioner or Councilwoman Spear spoke to it as well, was the adjacency of agricultural land, and I think she's experienced a similar trespass type of situation. And so that's what our neighbor to the south, Mr. Weiss, is concerned about with this development. And so we are working on some pricing right now, bidding of fencing to come up with a solution that will work for him and our development. So just want to let you report back that that's in process, and so that's what we're working on, and we'll have something solidified, I'm sure, before we're back before final plat, which I think is at about a month and a half or 2 months before we come back for that. So here is our preliminary plan. As you can see, our street alignment and our lot layout and all of the various parcels where the grocery anchored retail, the apartments, the community center, townhomes, they all effectively look like what we've represented all along, and so that's the intent. So there's your side-by-side comparison illustrating. So here's your townhome pods. So we won't actually subdivide those now. We'll wait until that builder's product is perfected, and then we'll come back with an actual site plan for that parcel, just like we will for the club and community center, which is located here, and the apartments located there. So just to kind of give an update to that process. And so we've illustrated this before. These are some of the different builders, residential architecture that we've shown before with lot layouts and the different styles of architecture on different lot sizes. So we've got 62 by 110 and 52 by 110 for your more traditional type of single-family homes. And you can see by looking at the architecture, we've got a mix of ranches and 2 stories. So what does that tell you? We're going to have a mix of everything from baby boomer to baby chaser to millennials as far as our population. We came up with a term called the baby chaser. What does that mean? That's when the baby boomers become grandma and grandpa and the son-in-law and daughter-in-law are living in a different state, so they move to town to become the baby chaser. So that's our little trademark term. Not really, but we made it up. And then here are some of the homes that will be single family, and they're alley loaded, alley load garage, and those are at the top of the screen, and then the townhomes on the bottom of the screen and how they look. And then commercial development standards will be a nice looking center. And then within our development, some of the trails and open space that I talked about, you see in green here is our connectivity to the school and the city's park site to the north. We both have vehicular accessibility on our plat, so that at some point in time when you develop your park, you'll have access here. And I also believe, based on the Freedom Parkway master plan, transportation master plan, that you also will have access off of Freedom Parkway, but that gives you a secondary point of access, plus the pedestrian trail connections through the parks and green spaces to get to the various amenities within the neighborhood, as well as nice opportunity for kids to be able to walk to school. That to me, as a parent, you know, my kids are long out of school, but as a young family, that would have been a fantastic amenity and a reason to move here. So this is a rendering of our park that we're working on construction drawings for, and that park is in phase 1A, located right here. So you can kind of see the shape of the walkways and playground and benches and shade structure and free play lawn area and landscape plantings. And then all of our plant selections will be low water use, xeriscape, which is very common in Colorado. Our commercial development will have berming where possible to screen parking lot, and then our retaining walls, should we have any, will be terraced, so we don't have tall walls and situations like that. Fencing, open rail will be backing up to our open space areas, and then this is the perimeter fencing along 37th and also along 65th, where housing might back up to the open space tracks that are nearby. So again, like I mentioned before, we're working on a fencing solution with our neighbor, Mr. Weiss, to the south, and we'll come up with some conclusion on what that might be. This is an example of the site furnishings that we anticipate to use through the parks and trails, so they'll all be of high grade quality metal with powder coated finishes. And then our lighting standards provided by our local utility company, and then this is a rendering of our front entry monument for Solstice along 65th Avenue with landscape in the backdrop. And then So these are our lot standards. If your eyes are as good as mine for the over 30 crowd, you can't read that from where you're sitting, because I know that I can't, but we've gone through this with staff for months and months and months, and we have staff support and public works support on all of those. Some of the other things that we're looking at, though, that are not permitted uses within this development, we kind of touched on this in zoning, were animal shelters, body art establishments, gaming and gambling facilities, and as well as a dispensary or any other type of marijuana facilities, whether or not it's allowed in the city in the present or in the future. It's not a permitted use on this project. And then a couple of other variances from your code regarding landscaping, where we don't have a 20-foot setback from the street because we have townhomes or alley-loaded type of single-family or townhomes, where the setback is a little closer to the street. Instead of a shade tree, we'll have an ornamental tree. So we're just, we're not trying to shirk our duties in terms of planting trees. I heard you, Mr. Mayor, loud and clear. We're big on trees as well, because they are the bones and the oxygen of the community. But we would request some a variance there with an ornamental tree versus a shade tree, just for spatial requirements. A couple of the architectural standards that that we have. Your code has wainscot of 2 feet. We're saying that it has to be a minimum of 3 feet around, because we find that the bottom of a windowsill is at least 3 feet, usually around the base of the front facade, and so we're basically raising that standard so that it's a higher quality. And then one of the other items was the articulation along the streetscape, requiring that we offset each home by 3 feet. Well, our lots are so prescriptive in terms of size and setback that we really don't have the luxury with product to be able to do that. And so the way that we feel that we achieve that is by the architecture with front porches, gables, and everything that we have shown here, so that you can look at when a builder submits for building permit that it is of like quality. That's, you know, that's just kind of something that we've experienced with national and regional builders, that lot sizes and the cost of real estate and everything are such that everything becomes a bit formulaic from that perspective. But the way that we can solve that is by the styles of architecture, rather than mandating how that house slides on a lot. Some of the other street design standards we've requested are these tighter turn radiuses in the neighborhood streets. They still allow safe and adequate movement of fire apparatus and trash trucks and all the normal operating activities. It's just, what it does is it's a traffic calming element. So our goal is access, not speed, because we want these to be safe local neighborhood streets. And all of these street standards meet the AASHTO standard, which is an engineering standard, and a lot of jurisdictions within the metro area utilize these, and Public Works was supportive of it. And then this just kind of shows our street right-of-way cross sections. So 65th Avenue over here, that'll have the 110-foot right-of-way, and then Freedom Parkway will have the 120th, as well as Two Rivers on our western western boundary. And then this is our 80-foot right-of-way north-south. You'll notice a theme with detached sidewalks and tree-lined streets. These are really a nice nod to historic neighborhoods, and they create wonderful communities, and that's what really, the streetscape is really what joins a community together. Anne reminded me this evening that this cross-section is actually erroneous. The sidewalk here should be detached and the tree should be adjacent to, and the cross-section would actually have about 28 feet of paving. So we will get that rectified with staff to comply with what we had agreed to do. And that particular street is our east-west minor collector here, as well as there and up adjacent to the commercial. But the right-of-way is the same. It's just that the configuration of how the where the sidewalk and the trees are swapped, and then this paving cross-section is 28 feet from back of curb to back of curb instead of what you're seeing on the screen there. So I apologize for that. And then these are the balance of the streets, 60-foot right-of-way, local street with both attached and detached sidewalk in the neighborhoods as your standard. And then one other point here. So we have a condition where both Freedom Parkway and Two Rivers, the right-of-way demands are such that we're asking for a sidewalk to be attached in this condition and this condition. Why is that? Because if it's detached, we're going to be impacting the wetlands further than we already are. So we're trying to minimize that. So there'll be a safety railing in that area, but once the sidewalk passes the wetlands and goes back to its normal condition, it will be detached. So that's a variance that we're asking for in those two conditions, because as a whole with this development, we've absolutely minimized the impacts to the wetland area and would like to try to keep it that way. So these are all the conditions that have been in staff. I'm not going to read them, staff report. I'm not going to read them all, but we agree with all of the conditions for approval, and look forward to any questions or comments that you may have. And I hope that you'll look favorably upon our proposal, and we seek approval. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ken. Any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. I just have a couple comments. I want to thank you for the presentation. It was fantastic. I want to thank you for addressing the concerns with your neighbors. I know a few of them have brought that up to our attention during other council meetings, so I want to appreciate you working with them and continuing to work with them. I'm just looking forward to this project. I'm glad that you talked about the safety and the enhancements of making the community safer and providing those, you know, different areas there to help facilitate that. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm still in support of this, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Councilman Clark.
Other questions or comments for the applicant?
Of course I do. Maybe not for the applicant, I guess, but really I do. Okay. You're putting, according to your diagram and your drawings here, your renderings, you're putting a fence around on the Two Rivers side, 37th side, and 65th Avenue side.
Where we have residential backing up, let me,
right.
If you don't mind, I'll back up to the slides. Okay, so there'll be fencing here along the back of these lots. That'll be solid fencing, and then open rail fencing there, open rail fencing internal where we back up to open space. There won't be any fencing up here, so I misspoke, but there will be solid fencing where we back up to the landscape track between the right-of-way and the back of the lots. There's a tract between the lot. You can't really see it with the trees drawn, but where my pointer is here, you can see a more pronounced open space tract. So wherever lots are siding or backing to a public street, they will have solid fencing. And I don't know if we'll be, frankly, fencing the apartment facility or apartment complex. That's to be determined, I suppose, at that time.
So why would there not be contiguous fencing then along the south side of it?
Well, that's what we're working through with the type of fencing. We hadn't planned on fencing when we first put this proposal together along our south side. We had actually anticipated that because there's an open space tract along the south side, that there would be an open rail fence like in other parts of the community. Now, subsequent to that, we have been alerted that that's a concern, and so we're working with Mr. Weiss to conclude what that might be, and I think it's leaning towards potentially a chain link type of fence, because he's concerned about trespass with dogs, cats, trash, and scooters.
Regardless of him showing up here, I would have been concerned about the same thing. This is a big, huge project. There's a lot of people on, and I just know that that comes with this kind of things. We also have dividing fences between a lot of our other subdivisions. We've got North Point, we've got the Ridge, and I just think if you are trying to make a metro district and it's going to be a certain area, that there needs to be some defining. I personally, I guess we can talk about this later. I would like to see there be a condition that there is a fence there. It would be one thing if all of these houses that they're going to build here were right up on the edge of the fence line, and they were requiring the houses themselves to have a fence, but there's a green space between the borders of the property and the houses. So I think both for the appeal of having that community, that subdivision, having it definitive, for future use, even if Mr. Weiss decides to sell, then it's still, you know, here's the defining line on the property. So since it's not actually in the conditions.
Councilman Spear, I think that what we can do is add a condition of approval number 12, indicating that a fencing plan shall be provided with the final plat application.
I don't think we have any objection to that. We're working diligently with our
I just
neighbor.
want to see it like finalized before the final plan comes in. I mean, I don't want to be sitting here on a verbal making decisions on that. Verbals might not happen.
Understood. He'll be here, I can assure you.
Other questions or comments for the applicant? I'd just like to say, I think this looks great. I think it's going to be a heck of a neighborhood. I'm excited for it. I'm glad you're getting your ducks in a row. And
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, do we have any questions of our staff?
None.
Mayor, I was somewhat concerned when I saw some of the smaller lot sizes, but I guess that meets our code, so I can't object to any of it. But I'm very much in favor of moving ahead with this, and and I'm thankful that you're taking some of the questions and comments from the neighbors in the open spaces into consideration. I know most people who move into a subdivision, eventually put up some kind of a fence, but not all of them do.
Sure.
And even with a fence, you sometimes have some unanticipated problems like drainage problems. So I'm glad that you're looking at addressing this and working with the south neighbor on this issue.
Thank you, Councilman Neal.
I just have one more comment. Thank you for addressing the fencing issue. I know when this came before us as a request for a metro district, I did speak up and vote against it. However, now that my co-council members and the mayor have voted to approve this, I will side with what they agree with doing.
Any other questions or comments?
I am for this. This is great. I'm
Thank
excited for this to go in. It's definitely gonna be a positive for our city, and I can't wait for
Thank
you all
you.
to start.
Thank you. We're excited about it too, Councilwoman Johnson, and we view this as your western gateway, and so we want to do a good job and be proud of it for the city as well as the development. Thank you.
There are no other questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion.
I was just going to say, as the Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting for Pinnacle Consulting, I work directly with the Metropolitan District at Peakview, and because of that, I'm going to recuse myself from the vote.
Jim, did you have something else?
Thank you.
Oh, pardon
yes.
me, Mayor, yes. Oh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I want to clarify tonight, you're voting on the conditions of approval with the additional number 12. The development guide and the development agreement will be finalized with final plat. So you will see that all in one nice, big, tidy package within the next month or two. And I just wanted to make that point clear.
Well, I was going to mention to that, I understand what Councilmember Spear says, but as far as the fencing concerns, I don't know if we should necessarily put that in there quite yet. I think they should work it out upon with the neighbors, because some of those neighbors may not want exactly that. One neighbor may, and the other one's like, I don't want that. I think that should be worked out with the neighbors and then brought back at a later date. I don't think that should be in a condition right away. Some neighbors may not want that.
I think that a perimeter fence should be in the condition. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of perimeter fence.
I'm just saying some of those neighbors may not want a perimeter fence. I'm just saying those that want it, they should work that out with them, and those that may not want that perimeter fence.
I think, are we dealing with one neighbor?
Yes.
So my question to you, Councilmember Clark, we have other subdivisions in the city. I do believe you probably live in one that has a perimeter fence around it defining the subdivision. Yes. That's what I'm asking for, a perimeter fence defining that subdivision.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't care. I mean, if they decide that a 6 foot tall electrical fence is fine, then that's what I just would like to have, a perimeter fence to let, with the amount of people that they're going to have living here, have it defining so that this is their area, and any property that goes in on the south or east or west, or I guess there's roads there, that's not going to be affected, but any property, future development or anything from the south is not going to be affected by what's happening in this development.
Sounds good.
We don't have a problem with that. Thank you, and thank you. We're good.
Okay. Since he does not have it, I think it's a go.
Yeah.
So that comment, that new proposed condition of approval 12 could be a perimeter fencing plan shall be provided with the final plat application.
That sounds fine. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 08-2019 as proposed with the additional conditions.
I second.
I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 08-2019 as proposed with the conditions of approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Great looking project.
Thank you very much.
Item B, consideration of resolution number 09-2019, a resolution amending the city's participation level in the Northern Integrated Supply Project. We'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor. At the March 19th City Council meeting, the council made the decision to reduce the city's allocation in the Northern Integrated Supply Project known as NISP from 1,600 acre feet of raw water to 1,200 acre feet. That decision followed numerous, I believe, 6 city council work sessions over a number of months that included 4 joint work sessions with the city's water and sewer board. The purpose of the action tonight is to just confirm the council's decision and memorialize some of the information and that has been presented, and have a resolution so that we can communicate definitively with the Northern Water Conservancy District regarding our participation level. There's quite a bit of information in the packet for sure. I certainly won't go back over all the information required for NISP, but I think for the record it's important to note that there are a number of uncertainties associated with the project in terms of ultimate cost, although we've factored in all the information that we have and try to be clear about what those assumptions are. There will be some rate increases required over the next 15 years at 1,200 acre feet. Those rate increases are estimated at this time over that 15 years to be approximately $35 total per month. We are aware that other agencies who are part of NISP are also evaluating their rates, and the cost of water will likely be going up for many communities in the area, but we just want to be clear about assumptions at this point, and we of course will discuss any questions that the council might have, but we're asking council to adopt a resolution confirming your adjusted participation level. That concludes our remarks, Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. Questions of staff? Comments?
Yeah, I think pretty much all of our questions and concerns were addressed at the work session.
Not only just the work session, like Jim said, I think we've had 4 or 5 work sessions on it. Gone to the Water and Sewer Board 4 or 5 times. We've had joint meetings with them as well. I think we're all pretty up to speed on what it is.
I'm very glad we were able to reach a compromise on this. I was at the top because I think we have a responsibility as Mr. Mayor, as you as the leader of the city, to provide for future requirements for our children and future generations. So I'm hoping that this will cover some of it, even though it's not as what everybody on the council wanted at first. Some wanted a lower participation level, but I think we've reached a nice compromise on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 9-2019.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 09-2019. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item C, approval of the preliminary budget revision for Riverside Park.
Thank you, Mayor. At your last meeting, we conducted a work session to share with council the experience that we've had with in our first 6 months with our reopened park. And the upshot of that experience is that things are going well. We do have a number of additional, some small, some modest cost improvements that we think would be worthwhile at this point. These improvements will improve operations, aesthetics, and security at the park. The budget includes sod for the planned soccer fields, improving the overflow parking lot, adding entryway signage at both entrances, to the park. Additionally, there are some final touches to the concession building, irrigation controls, and some screening on fences that are also recommended at this time. At the conclusion of your work session, we received a direction to bring back a preliminary budget revision for the items that are listed in the staff report that I just summarized. The purpose of a preliminary budget revision, as council knows, is that we have your authority to go forward with a few items before our regularly scheduled budget revision process will happen in a couple months. We need to get moving, particularly with the sod for the soccer field, so that it can be in really good shape for Heritage Day this fall. So along with the sod, we thought we'd get moving on these other things. And with that, I would request any questions from council in your granting of the preliminary budget revision in the amount of $185,000 for improvements to the park. I also want to mention, don't want to forget, since the work session, staff has heard a couple questions from council looking for a little more information on the restrooms that are recommended not to be improved. They're not part of this budget revision. The questions were about the extent of the damage that had actually occurred and some of the cost that we could see or that we could anticipate if we did want to go ahead and restore or replace the permanent restrooms that are there. As part of the discussion, staff had recommended moving forward with some portalet facilities that would have some relatively nice screening around them to improve their aesthetics. We felt that those would deter vandalism more and be cheaper to address vandalism that might happen. We could get some time with those facilities, and then perhaps council could discuss again permanent restrooms. But we wanted to bring that information back. We have some pictures with some cost estimates for different styles of restrooms, and also a little more detail in the staff report about the extent of the damage to the current restroom. So main item tonight is the preliminary budget revision that we hope that you'll provide, but we also wanted to hear if there is some council consensus to continue the discussion at this time about restrooms. We'd be glad to schedule another work session and bring that back and go into more detail on that. And that concludes our remarks.
Thank you, Jim. Questions of the city manager or staff? Any comments?
I appreciate him taking a look at this restroom thing. I had spoken with a few people that were walking in the park, and they all indicated that they would appreciate having a restroom rather than trying to find a tree to go behind out there, especially in early spring like right now. It's pretty bare out there to try to find a spot to go if you need to go.
Any other comments?
Yeah, we do want to discourage them not using the restroom, so, I think we need to look at that further.
Yeah, I do think we'll find that.
Agreed.
Back, Jim.
We'd
We'd like another work
We'd like to
session.
talk about toilets.
Yeah.
on the restrooms, yes.
As far as the budget revision, any other questions or comments?
No, good with it.
Yeah, it looks good to me, and it's still it's still within our budget, so I'm all for it.
Before you ask for a vote on this, I just want to point out once again that I've been asked to not vote on this, so I will recuse myself because I am the largest neighbor next to the park.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. Other questions or comments? Entertain a motion.
I move to approve the preliminary budget revision of $185,000 for the improvements to Riverside Park.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary budget revision of $185,000 for the improvements to Riverside Park. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item D, consideration of resolution number 10-2019, a resolution appointing an alternate judge for Evans Municipal Court. I'll hear from staff.
Thank you, Mayor, and I will quickly turn this over to Assistant City Attorney Dan Krob.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As many of you know, I'm also the prosecuting attorney here, and the judge came up to me after court one day and said, you know, this doesn't really happen very often, but we should have some kind of backup plan in case the judge can't make it and we have 60 to 80 defendants sitting in court. He did say that I think he's missed court once in the last decade, and he foresees that to be about where the next decade should go. So this is not anything that's super urgent. The judge did provide Mr. Christian Schultz as the alternate judge that he would recommend. Staff has conferred with Jim as the manager, the chief of police, and then I've reviewed his resume. He is qualified, definitely has plenty of prosecutorial experience, and per the city code, he meets all the requirements there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
No, it's pretty straightforward.
Makes sense. Always good to have a backup.
Exactly.
No questions or comments, and entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 10-2019.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve resolution number 10-2019. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item 9, report, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item. You may be seeing some smoke next week. We're getting close to the irrigation season, scheduled to start April 15th. Next week, well, staff has been doing several repairs to the Evans ditch, and they will be burning the ditch next week, so it's ready when the water is ready to come in middle of the month. So just want to let council know that, and that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Jim. City attorney.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As I told you last week, or last meeting, April 8th, we have a status conference in the EQR case. We're working on the Peak View Development Agreement, and we had a 2.5-hour attorney conference on the NISP legal conference yesterday, so that's what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Next item on the agenda is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address City Council on any item? Please step up to the podium, state your name and address, sir. Thank you for being here.
Richard Wiest, 4525 65th Avenue. First of all, I'd like to thank you for sticking up for me. I'm the person on the south side of the Peak View, and it really is. I'm all by myself, and that is a huge project. And they give them credit. We're not there exactly, but we're close to agreeing on the fence, very close. But I have a couple other little quick concerns. These abandoned oil wells, are you going to build the homes over these abandoned oil wells? Just throwing that out there. I'm not going to live there, but somebody is. I'll just throw that out there. Another question or comment. I'm full-time farming, and that's all farming except to the north, kind of. Are you going to make it known to the people that buy out there that there's going to be dust? They mentioned burning. I burn ditches. I spray insecticides. I spray herbicides. I mean, are you going to tell the people that they're moving into an agricultural community? I'm not moving into the city. They're moving into the agricultural community. I mean, I think there needs to be some knowledge or something to tell these people. Because I'm the one that they're going to come to. What did you spray with? Is it going to kill my dog? Is it going to kill my trees? They're going to come to me. Because I used to farm all this ground. And the people that bought the old school, the Ashton School, every time I did something, here they came. My cat, my dog, my tree. And it's, you know, I do the same things I've done all my life. I hire all the spraying done. Those people are qualified. They're insured. But every time they sprayed, here he came. What did you spray with? What was it? Was it going to do this? It's going to do that. So I think you need to make the people aware of what's going on out there. I mean, they're moving into my neighborhood. I'm not moving into theirs. And then that last thing real quick, traffic. I don't think you're addressing the traffic. You know, this is a 4-year project, and I've been coming to the meetings. I think you've seen me. It's going to be 10 years before you get to 65th Avenue with 37th as a 4-lane. So that means 6 years after this is all done, and that's a 4-year project, before you get 4 lanes out there, and the traffic is horrendous. That's just a comment. So I thank you for your time, and I thank you, Councilman Spears, for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese, for being here. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address City Council? Okay, thank you. Next item is executive session.
I move to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters involving employees and organizational structure updates pursuant to section 24-6-402, section 4, subsection B of the Colorado Revised Statutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We'll now go into executive session. Thank you for being here. Steve, you're the last one. Thanks for being here.
Staff.
Staff.